An undercover billionaire walked into his own store pretending to be a trainee. But when he met a black cashier struggling to work with broken arms, what he uncovered left the entire world in tears. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more powerful true life stories that inspire change. Share this video with someone who needs hope today, because sometimes just one story can change a life. The boardroom was quiet when Marcus Ellington, the 55-year-old founder and CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing grocery chains, closed his laptop. For most of his career, Marcus had lived in glass towers, far away from the aisles and checkout counters where real life unfolded. From up there, success was measured in spreadsheets and charts, in glowing investor calls and glowing headlines. But recently, his heart had begun to whisper a different truth. The complaints had trickled in for months, workers talking about poor schedules, lack of healthcare support, even burnout. Marcus had read those reports with a furrowed brow, but distance had made it easy to shrug them off. Middle management will handle it, he had told himself. But something inside him had shifted. Maybe it was age, or maybe it was the subtle guilt of knowing he hadn't walked the floors of his own stores in years. Whatever the reason, Marcus had made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. He would go undercover, not as the billionaire everyone recognized in the business world, but as a regular new hire. A trainee, a man nobody would look twice at. If there were cracks in his company's foundation, he wanted to feel them under his own feet. 2 weeks later, a man named Mark Edwards clocked in for his first shift at a busy branch of Freshway supermarkets. He wore a plain polo shirt, faded jeans, and a cheap cap that hid the distinguished salt and pepper hair that had once been a trademark of his magazine covers. His glasses, slightly oversized, made his face look softer, more ordinary. The manager barely looked at him. "New trainee? All right, go shadow the cashiers. Don't slow down the line," she said flatly before turning away. Marcus, now Mark, took a deep breath. This was exactly what he wanted, the raw, unfiltered experience. The store was a whirlwind of motion. Carts squeaked across the tile floor, children tugged at their parents' sleeves for candy, and the smell of freshly baked bread drifted from the bakery section. Mark tried to blend in, quietly stacking bags, scanning items, and offering awkward smiles to customers. And then he saw him. At the far register, a man stood with his arms wrapped in stiff braces. Both forearms were strapped from wrist to elbow, held steady with black supports. Yet somehow the man worked the register with remarkable speed. He nudged items forward with his elbows, tapped the keys with awkward precision, and used the tips of his fingers where he could. Every movement looked painful, yet there was no bitterness in his face. Instead, there was a smile, gentle, weary, but genuine, as he greeted each customer with warmth. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I hope you're having a good day," the cashier said, his deep voice carrying both strength and fatigue. Some customers smiled back, touched by his kindness. Others frowned impatiently, muttering under their breath about how slow the line was moving. Mark noticed it all. The contrast between the man's struggle and the world's indifference hit him like a stone in the chest. During the lull between customers, Mark drifted closer to the register. "Hey, I'm Mark. New trainee," he said, trying to sound casual. The cashier glanced at him with a quick nod. "Andre," he replied simply, before turning back to the conveyor belt. Mark watched as Andre lifted a gallon of milk with the edge of his forearm, grimacing slightly before sliding it across the scanner. His jaw tightened, but the smile returned the second he handed it back to the customer. "How long have you been working here?" Mark asked. Andre's lips curved into a faint grin. "Long enough to know the coffee machine breaks down every Monday, and the manager never listens when we tell her." They shared a small laugh. But even in that brief exchange, Mark sensed a deeper story lurking behind Andre's humor. Hours passed, and Mark shadowed Andre, helping bag items and greeting customers. He could see the toll it took on the man. Every time Andre reached too far or twisted his arm the wrong way, his body stiffened in pain. But he never complained, never asked for help, never let his smile falter for more than a second. It was almost heroic, and heartbreaking. Later, in the break room, Mark sat across from Andre at a small plastic table. Andre had a simple lunch, a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in foil, an apple, and a bottle of water. He ate quickly, eyes focused on the wall clock. "Those braces must be tough," Mark said carefully, testing the waters. Andre glanced at his arms, then shrugged. "It is what it is. I manage." Mark wanted to ask more, but something in Andre's tone warned him not to push. So instead, he said, "Well, for what it's worth, you're one of the hardest workers I've ever seen." Andre's eyes softened. For a second, the guarded mask slipped. "Thanks." Not many people notice. The bell rang, break was over, and Andre pushed himself to his feet. That evening, after his shift, Mark sat in his car in the darkened parking lot, still wearing the cheap cap and glasses. He couldn't shake the image of Andre, working tirelessly with arms that clearly needed rest. Why was he there? What forced a man in that condition to stand behind a register all day, enduring pain for a paycheck that could barely cover rent? Mark clenched the steering wheel. He had come undercover to see how his employees were treated. But this was something else. It wasn't just about management. It was about survival, and he needed to know the truth. The next morning, Mark arrived early. He had hardly slept the night before. Andre's image, arms bound in braces yet still smiling through the pain, had haunted his thoughts all night. Marcus Ellington, the CEO hidden behind this disguise, had seen hardship before in his business career, but nothing like this. There was something about Andre's quiet resilience that gnawed at his conscience. The store hummed with its usual chaos. Workers wheeled in pallets of produce. The loudspeaker blared morning announcements, and the smell of fresh donuts carried from the bakery. Mark took a deep breath, straightened his cheap polo, and joined the team on the floor. Andre was already at his register, arranging his scanner and keyboard with the careful precision of a man who knew his limits all too well. He greeted Mark with a nod. "Back for round 2? Andre asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Guess so," Mark said, forcing a grin. "You ready for the rush?" Andre chuckled softly. Rush never waits for anyone. By 8 a.m., the store was buzzing. Mark positioned himself nearby, bagging groceries and observing Andre's rhythm. It was astonishing. With braces locking his forearms, Andre still managed to move faster than some of the other cashiers. His fingers tapped the register keys awkwardly but efficiently. He slid items across the scanner with his elbows, nudged heavier items with his shoulder, and used every ounce of creativity just to keep the line moving. But not everyone appreciated it. "Seriously? This line is crawling!" a woman with a sharp voice complained, crossing her arms. Her cart was full, cereal boxes, fruit, detergent stacked high. "Can't you open another register?" Andre's smile didn't fade. "I'm sorry for the wait, ma'am. I'll do my best to get you through quickly." Mark felt his jaw tighten as the woman rolled her eyes dramatically. Unbelievable. "They'll hire anyone these days." Andre said nothing, only kept scanning, his movements calm but clearly strained. The woman tapped her foot impatiently until finally her items were bagged. She snatched her receipt and stormed off without a thank you. Mark clenched his fists inside the plastic bag he was holding. He wanted to snap at her, reveal who he really was, and demand she show respect. But he couldn't, not yet. Not while undercover. Instead, he glanced at Andre, who had already turned to the next customer with that same quiet smile. "Morning, sir. Did you find everything okay?" It was as though the insult hadn't even touched him. Not everyone was cruel. A young father with 2 toddlers in tow leaned forward after paying. "Hey, man," he said softly. "You're doing a great job. My wife had carpal tunnel once. She knows how hard it is when your arms aren't right. Respect for being here and pushing through." Andre's face brightened, and for a brief moment his smile reached his eyes. "Thank you. That means a lot." The toddlers waved at him, giggling as Andre wiggled his braced fingers awkwardly in return. Mark felt something twist in his chest. Why does he need strangers' kindness to validate what should be obvious? Later, during a brief lull, Mark overheard 2 younger employees whispering near the self-checkout machines. "Man, Andre's so slow. He should just take medical leave." "Yeah, but he won't. You know he's always working extra shifts." "Guy's crazy," Mark bit his tongue, pretending to rearrange bags while his ears burned. To them, Andre's sacrifice was just an inconvenience. They didn't see the bigger picture. Yet another worker, a middle-aged stock clerk, approached Andre with a gentle pat on the back. "Need me to grab that crate for you, brother?" Andre shook his head. "Nah, I got it." But the pain flickered across his face before he quickly masked it. Mark noted every detail. Every sigh, every smirk, every hidden wince. At noon, the team filed into the cramped break room. The hum of the soda machine filled the silence as workers unwrapped sandwiches and scrolled through their phones. Andre sat alone, unwrapping another simple meal, a chicken sandwich. Wrapped in foil, Mark slid into the seat across from him. "Rough morning?" Andre shrugged. "Just another day. Some folks are impatient, some are kind. You learn to focus on the kind ones." Mark studied him carefully. "Doesn't it bother you? The rude customers?" Andre chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You can't control how people act, only how you respond. If I let every insult get to me, I'd never survive this job." His words carried a weight that went beyond the supermarket walls. "You ever think about taking a break? You know, resting those arms?" Mark asked cautiously. Andre's eyes flickered, guarded again. "Can't afford to. Bills don't take breaks." Before Mark could ask more, the break room buzzer sounded, calling them back to the registers. Andre stood, adjusted his braces, and forced another smile onto his face. The afternoon brought another surge of customers. Mark watched in silence as Andre worked through line after line, his movements slower now, more deliberate. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Each time he twisted wrong, he flinched, then quickly disguised it with a smile. At one point, a heavy bag of dog food slid down the conveyor belt. Andre reached for it instinctively, only to freeze mid-motion, his arms trembling. Mark stepped in quickly, grabbing the bag and hoisting it into the cart. "Thanks," Andre muttered quietly, his pride clearly bruised. "No problem," Mark said gently, but inside his heart ached. This wasn't just physical pain, it was dignity at stake. By closing time, the store had quieted. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as employees wiped down counters and restocked shelves. Andre stood by his register, methodically counting his till with the same quiet precision he had shown all day. Mark approached him, hesitating for a moment. "You're something else, you know that? I don't think I've ever seen someone work that hard under those conditions." Andre looked at him, eyes tired but kind. "Work is work. You do what you gotta do." He paused, as if weighing whether to say more. "Some people don't have the luxury of quitting when things get hard." Mark swallowed, unable to find words. He had lived his whole life with the luxury of choice, with the freedom to step back, delegate, or walk away when things became overwhelming. But Andre had no such safety net. As Andre clocked out and walked slowly toward the exit, his silhouette framed by the sliding glass doors, Mark knew this was only the beginning. He had come undercover to find cracks in his company. What he had found instead was a man, carrying the weight of survival on two broken arms, and he needed to know why. The third day of Mark's training began with the heavy thrum of rain against the supermarket's glass windows. Shoppers hurried inside, shaking water from umbrellas and jackets, carts clattering on the wet tile floors. Mark arrived a little earlier than usual, determined to spend the day shadowing Andre more closely. By now, he had noticed patterns. Andre always arrived 10 minutes early, never late. He greeted everyone, co-workers, customers, managers, with the same gentle smile. But beneath that calm exterior, Mark had seen the truth. The stiffness in his shoulders, the subtle grimace when he reached for an item, the quiet sighs when no one was watching. Today, Mark wanted answers. Andre was already at his register, setting up with his usual quiet efficiency. "Morning," Mark greeted, sliding into position beside him to start bagging. Andre nodded. "Morning. Ready for the storm crowd?" Mark chuckled. "Storm crowd?" "Yeah. Every time it rains, folks act like the world's ending. Stock up on milk, bread, eggs. You'll see." Sure enough, within an hour, the store was overflowing. Lines stretched back into the aisles. Customers dumped carts full of essentials onto the belts. Mark worked quickly beside Andre, bagging items. running to grab replacement paper bags when supplies ran out. In the chaos, Mark noticed something small but powerful. Andre greeted every single customer by name if he knew it. "Morning. Mrs. Holloway, how's your knee feeling?" "Hey, Tom, how's little Marcus doing with baseball?" Even the most impatient customers softened when Andre spoke to them. His kindness had a ripple effect, calming stormy tempers in the middle of the rush. Mark couldn't help but admire it. How does he keep giving so much when he's clearly hurting? Later, during their mid-morning break, Mark followed Andre into the cramped break room. Andre poured himself coffee, moving slowly, carefully, as if every motion had to be calculated to avoid pain. Mark took a seat across from him. "You always seem to know everyone's name," he said casually. Andre smiled faintly. "People like to be remembered. Makes them feel seen. My mom used to say, 'Names are the cheapest gift you can give, but the one people treasure most.'" Mark leaned forward. "Your mom sounds wise." "Yeah," Andre said softly, staring at his coffee cup. "She was." The past tense didn't go unnoticed. Mark felt a pang in his chest, but he stayed quiet, giving Andre space. After a long pause, Andre added, "This job may not seem like much to most folks, but for some people, being recognized here, it's the highlight of their day." "That's why I try," Mark nodded, hiding the storm of thoughts inside him. Here was a man in pain, working with broken arms, still putting others first. Back on the floor, Mark saw more of Andre's daily battles. A heavy carton of canned goods slid down the belt, and Andre instinctively reached for it. His arms trembled under the weight. Mark stepped in quickly, grabbing it before Andre could hurt himself. "You don't need to—" Andre began. "Yes, I do," Mark interrupted firmly. "Teamwork, right?" Andre chuckled softly, though his pride was clearly dented. "You catch on quick." But later, when the manager barked at him for not moving fast enough, Andre absorbed the criticism silently, without a word of defense. Mark's blood boiled. She has no idea what this man is pushing through, he thought. No idea how much pain he's masking. At lunch, Mark decided to push a little further. "You ever think about, I don't know, doing something else?" he asked. "You're clearly smart, good with people." Andre sighed, eyes fixed on his sandwich. "I don't really have that choice. I've got responsibilities." "What kind?" Mark pressed gently. Andre hesitated, then finally said, "My little sister. She's 16, straight A student, wants to be a doctor one day. And my grandmother, she's 82, needs medication every month. Someone's got to keep the lights on, put food on the table. That someone is me." Mark felt his chest tighten. The weight Andre carried suddenly became heavier in his eyes. Not just physical pain, but the burden of family survival. "So you keep working, even with your arms like this?" Mark asked quietly. Andre's eyes hardened, but not with anger, just determination. "Pain is temporary. Family is forever." Mark sat in stunned silence. In that moment, the employee in front of him became more than just a worker in his company. He was a man sacrificing everything for the people he loved. By the time the evening shift wound down, Mark felt more connected to Andre than ever. They shared small jokes at the register, exchanged knowing looks when customers acted ridiculous, and worked side by side like they had been a team for years. As Andre clocked out, Mark walked with him to the parking lot. Rain had finally stopped, leaving puddles glowing under the streetlights. "You need a ride?" Mark offered. Andre shook his head. "Nah, I'll walk." "Bus stop's just down the road," Mark frowned. "With your arms? Carrying everything?" Andre shrugged, lifting his small backpack with obvious effort. "Like I said, you do what you gotta do." He gave a tired smile, then disappeared into the night, his reflection rippling across rain-soaked pavement. Mark stood there, his heart heavy. This wasn't just about an employee anymore. This was personal. Andre had let him glimpse behind the mask, just a little. Enough to know there was far more pain and far more strength than met the eye. And Mark knew he had to see the rest of the story. The next few days blurred. Together in the rhythm of grocery store. Life, beeping scanners, shuffling carts, endless lines of weary customers. But for Mark, every moment spent beside Andre felt heavier, loaded with questions he couldn't stop asking in his mind. How had this man ended up working with both arms bound in braces? Why didn't he stop? And what kind of world forced him to keep smiling through it all? Mark knew that if he pushed too hard, Andre would shut down. He had learned quickly that Andre carried his pride like a shield. But he also knew there was a crack in that armor, small glimpses he'd caught when Andre spoke of his family. He just needed to wait for the right moment. On Wednesday evening, the store was unusually calm. Rainstorms had kept most shoppers at home, leaving only a trickle of customers moving through the aisles. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and soft elevator music played faintly over the speakers. Andre worked his register with the same careful rhythm, though slower now, fatigue etched across his face. His movements were deliberate, each scan and bagging motion clearly costing him effort. Mark seized the opportunity. With fewer customers around, the weight of conversation wouldn't be interrupted by impatient sighs or tapping feet. He slid into the bagging station, folding plastic sacks with unnecessary precision just to stay close. "You ever regret staying here?" Mark asked casually, eyes fixed on the counter. Andre raised an eyebrow. "Here, as in this job?" Mark nodded. Andre gave a dry chuckle. "Regret's a luxury, man. Some of us don't get to ask, 'Do I like this?' We just ask, 'Can I survive this?'" Mark swallowed hard, the words hitting deeper than Andre probably intended. Later, during their 15-minute break, Mark found Andre alone in the corner of the break room. The others had left, giving them privacy. Andre sat with his arms resting heavily on the table, braces clicking softly as he adjusted them. His sandwich lay untouched in front of him. Mark sat down, lowering his voice. "You can tell me to shut up if I'm crossing a line, but how did it happen? Your arms!" Andre's gaze flickered, his jaw tightening. For a moment, Mark thought he'd close up completely. But then, Andre exhaled slowly, as if the weight of silence had become heavier than the weight of speaking. "Car accident," he said quietly. Mark leaned forward, listening intently. 3 months ago, I was driving home after a late shift. A truck blew through a red light. "Hit me head on!" Andre lifted his arms slightly, the braces catching the light. Both forearms fractured. "Doctor said I'd need months before I was fully healed. Surgery, physical therapy, the whole package." Mark's stomach sank. "And your insurance?" Andre let out a bitter laugh. "Insurance covered the first ER visit. After that, denied half the treatments. Said I hadn't met the criteria or some nonsense fine print. Every therapy session would have been out of pocket. Thousands of dollars I didn't have." Mark clenched his fists under the table. He had approved those policies years ago, streamlined, cost-cutting, designed to make the numbers look good on quarterly reports. Sitting across from Andre, those numbers now felt like shackles on a man's life. "So you came back to work," Mark said softly. Andre nodded. "Bills don't wait. My sister's in high school, dreams of college. My grandma's meds cost more than rent. I couldn't sit at home and let everything crumble. Broken arms or not, I had to show up." His voice trembled for the first time, just slightly. "Do you know what it feels like to look at your family and know they're counting on you? And then realize you can't even lift a plate without pain? But still, you have to pretend you're strong because if you don't, the whole house falls apart?" Mark's throat tightened. He wanted to rip off the disguise, shout that he was the man who could fix all of this right now. But he couldn't, not yet. Andre wasn't just sharing facts. He was bleeding truth, and interrupting it with some grand reveal would cheapen the rawness of it. So he sat quietly, absorbing every word. Andre leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Sometimes I think back to that night. I remember the crunch of metal, the way my arms bent in ways they weren't supposed to. I thought that was it. I thought I'd never work again, never hold anything again. And then I woke up in the hospital and realized I was still alive. Broken but alive. And alive means you fight." He paused, his eyes dark but steady. "Pain? You learn to live with it. But quitting? That's not an option." Mark felt his chest ache with a mix of admiration and guilt. Here was a man who had survived what should have ended his ability to work, and instead of giving in, he had returned to a register, smiling for strangers who often didn't care. Their break ended, but the weight of the conversation lingered as they returned to the floor. Andre moved with his usual determination, but Mark noticed every wince, every stiff motion. A customer dropped a glass jar of pasta sauce, and the crimson mess splattered across the tile. Andre bent instinctively to help clean it up, but his arms trembled violently. Mark rushed in, kneeling beside him. "I got it," Mark said firmly, grabbing paper towels. Andre hesitated, then reluctantly straightened. For the first time, Mark saw real frustration flash across his face, not at Mark, but at himself. At his own limits. That moment pierced deeper than any words could. At the end of the shift, Mark lingered in the parking lot again, watching Andre walk toward the bus stop. His gait was slow, his shoulders sagging under invisible weight. Mark leaned back against his car, rain dripping from the awning above. His mind spun. He had heard the truth now, the accident, the bills, the crushing weight of family responsibility, and for the first time in years, Marcus Ellington, the CEO, felt powerless. It wasn't numbers on a spreadsheet. It wasn't a line item in a budget. It was a man's life, and the guilt of knowing his own company's policies had played a role in that suffering burned hotter than any storm. Mark knew one thing for certain. This story wasn't over. Not for Andre. Not for him. The next morning, the store felt different. It wasn't just the hum of fluorescent lights or the chatter of early shoppers. It was the heaviness in the air, something invisible that pressed down on everyone, especially Andre. Mark noticed it the second he walked in. Andre's smile, the smile he had worn like armor every day, wasn't there. His face was pale, the dark circles under his eyes deeper than usual. His movements were stiff, as if even the braces weren't enough to hold his arms steady anymore. "Morning," Mark greeted, trying to sound light. Andre forced a smile. "Morning, man! Ready for another day of chaos?" His tone was playful, but his voice cracked ever so slightly. The first hours passed in a blur. Customers shuffled in and out, oblivious to the storm building inside Andre. His pain was obvious now. Mark could see it in the way Andre winced when lifting even small items, in the way he pressed his jaw tight to stop himself from groaning, and still, Andre kept moving. It was mid-afternoon when everything began to unravel. A woman with an overflowing cart pulled into Andre's lane. She was impatient from the start, tapping her fingers on the counter as the line grew behind her. Andre worked as quickly as he could, but with his arms shaking and his braces digging into his skin, the pace wasn't fast enough. "Can you hurry up?" the woman snapped, glaring at him. "I don't have all day." Andre's lips parted, but he didn't argue. He kept scanning, his face burning with shame. The gallon of milk slipped from his grip, tumbling onto the conveyor belt with a thud. "Unbelievable!" the customer muttered loudly. "Why would they even put someone like you on a register?" The words cut through the air like a blade. Mark froze, his fists clenching at his sides. Andre's hands trembled. For a split second, the mask cracked. His eyes shimmered with tears he couldn't blink away fast enough. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. I'm sorry, ma'am, but the apology wasn't enough." The woman huffed, crossing her arms. "This is ridiculous. I'll be talking to the manager." The store went silent. People in line shifted uncomfortably. Some looked sympathetic, others just annoyed by the delay. No one spoke up, except Mark. "That's enough," he said, stepping forward. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The customer turned to glare at him, surprised. "And who are you supposed to be?" she demanded. "Just another employee," Mark replied firmly. "But I know this man is working harder than anyone else in this store." "Maybe show a little respect," the woman scoffed, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out, leaving her groceries behind. But the damage had already been done. Andre stood frozen, his chest heaving, eyes fixed on the floor. When the next customer approached, he couldn't move. His arms hung limp at his sides, and his body trembled like a dam about to burst. "Hey," Mark whispered gently. "You okay?" Andre shook his head. I can't do this anymore." His voice cracked, raw and broken. He stepped back from the register, stumbling into the break room. Mark followed without hesitation. Inside, Andre collapsed into a chair, his braces clattering against the table as he buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook violently. For the first time since Mark had met him, Andre stopped fighting. "I'm so tired, man," Andre choked out. "So damn tired. Every day it feels like the world's daring me to quit, but I can't. I can't because if I stop working, my sister doesn't get her meds. If I stop, my nephew doesn't eat. I've been holding it together for so long, and today, His words dissolved into sobs. Mark's heart shattered. He wanted to rip off his disguise right then and there, to tell Andre who he really was, to promise him he would never have to suffer like this again. But he knew the timing wasn't right. Andre didn't need a CEO in that moment. He needed a friend. You don't have to apologize for being human, Mark said softly, pulling a chair beside him. What you're carrying? No one should have to carry that alone. Andre wiped his face, shaking his head. But I do. Because if I don't, who will? The bills don't wait. The medicine doesn't wait. The world doesn't wait. His voice grew sharper, edged with anger. Not at Mark, but at life itself. And this job? It doesn't care if my arms are broken. It doesn't care if I can barely sleep. All it cares about is if I can keep up with the register. That woman today, she just said out loud what everyone else is already thinking. Mark leaned forward, his throat tight. Andre, you're worth more than this. You deserve better than this. Andre let out a bitter laugh. Better? I used to believe that. But life doesn't hand out better, man. You just take what you can get and hope it's enough to survive. For a long moment, silence filled the break room. The hum of the vending machine was the only sound. Mark studied the man before him. Not just the cashier with broken arms, but the brother, the protector, the fighter who refused to give up no matter how heavy the burden. He saw strength, but also the cracks forming beneath it. And he knew, if something didn't change soon, Andre might not survive this. The shift ended in heavy silence. Andre walked out of the store with his head down, his steps slow and weary. Mark sat in his car again, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had come undercover to expose flaws in his company, but what he had found was far more personal, far more devastating. This wasn't just about broken systems. It was about a man breaking in front of him, and Mark couldn't let that happen. That night, Mark sat alone in his study, staring at the city lights through his window. His disguise lay folded on the desk, a reminder of the lie he was still living. He wrestled with the urge to end it now, to tell Andre the truth. But deep inside, he knew Andre's breaking point was also his turning point. This was the moment that would decide everything. Andre's future, his company's future, and even Mark's own legacy. And Mark silently vowed, I will not fail him. The store buzzed with its usual rhythm the next morning. Scanners beeping, carts rattling, customers shuffling in and out. But for Mark, it wasn't just another shift. Today was different. Today, he had decided, he wasn't going to watch Andre suffer in silence any longer. All night, Mark had wrestled with himself. The role of Mark Edwards' trainee had allowed him to see the truth, raw and unfiltered. But it had also forced him to stay silent while Andre collapsed under the weight of a life far too heavy for one man. That silence ended today. Andre clocked in late. His face was pale, his steps sluggish. His arms were wrapped tighter than usual, the braces almost digging into his skin. Morning, Mark said gently. Andre tried to smile. Morning, man. Sorry, I overslept. My sister had a rough night. Mark felt a pang of guilt. He knew about the sister, the nephew, the endless sacrifices. But Andre didn't know who he was talking to. Not yet. Don't worry about it, Mark said softly. Actually, can we talk after your shift? Andre frowned. Everything okay? Mark nodded. Yeah, just important. The hours crawled by. Mark helped where he could, bagging groceries, chatting with customers, keeping an eye on Andre. But his heart was pounding the whole time, waiting for the moment. Finally, the shift ended. Andre slumped into the break room, peeling off his braces to rub the sore muscles underneath. His arms were red and swollen, his face etched with exhaustion. All right, Andre muttered. What's so important? Mark closed the door behind him, took a deep breath, and sat across from him. Andre, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Andre raised an eyebrow. You're not quitting already, are you? Because honestly, I wouldn't blame you. Mark smiled faintly. No, I'm not quitting. But I haven't exactly been honest about who I am. Andre's expression shifted. Confused, cautious. What do you mean? Mark reached up and pulled off his glasses, setting them on the table. Then he removed the cap, letting his salt and pepper hair fall into place. Without the disguise, his face was unmistakable. Andre froze. His eyes widened, his mouth falling open. Wait a second. No way! Mark held his gaze. My name isn't Mark Edwards. It's Marcus Ellington. I'm the CEO of Freshway. Silence filled the room. Andre blinked several times, as if trying to process the words. Then he laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. You're kidding, right? This is some kind of prank? Mark shook his head. I wish it was. But it's the truth. I came undercover to see what life was really like for my employees. And Andre, what I saw through you has changed me. Andre leaned back, stunned. His chest rose and fell heavily, his eyes darting to the floor and then back to Mark. So, all this time, you were the boss? Watching me struggle? Watching me? His voice cracked. You knew? Mark's heart clenched. I didn't know. Not until I met you. I didn't know what you were carrying, what you were fighting through every single day. But once I did, I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. Andre shook his head, running his hands over his face. Man, I don't even know what to say. You're telling me the CEO of this whole company has been bagging groceries next to me for 2 weeks? Yes, Mark said simply. Because I had to see it. I had to feel it. And you opened my eyes. Andre sat in stunned silence. Finally, he whispered, so what now? You take off the costume, go back to your office in the sky, and forget about the broken cashier who can barely keep his life together? Mark's voice was firm. No, that's not why I revealed myself. I told you because I can't stand by and watch you break anymore. You've given more of yourself than anyone should be asked to give, and it's time someone gave back to you. Andre's lip trembled, but he tried to laugh it off. You don't have to say all that, boss. I'm just a cashier. No, Mark said sharply. You're not just anything. You're a man holding up an entire family. You're a man working through pain that would have broken most people. You're an inspiration, Andre, and I can't let your story end here. Tired, unseen, and forgotten. Tears welled in Andre's eyes, but he blinked them away. You don't get it, Marcus. My life. It's not some inspirational movie. It's bills stacked on bills, a sick sister, a kid who deserves better than I can give him. I don't need pity. I need a miracle. And I stopped believing in those a long time ago. Mark leaned forward, his voice steady. Then let me be your miracle. Andre stared at him, speechless. I came undercover to learn about my employees, Mark continued. But you showed me something deeper. You showed me resilience, sacrifice, love. You reminded me why I built this company in the first place. Not for profit, not for headlines, but for people. People like you. The room was heavy with emotion. For the first time, Andre allowed the tears to fall freely down his cheeks. He covered his face with his hands, shaking his head. Why me? He whispered. Why out of all the employees in all your stores? Why me? Mark's eyes softened. Because fate put me in your lane. And because I believe God, or life, or whatever you want to call it, knew I needed to see you. I needed to see the truth through your eyes. And now that I have, I'm never going back. Andre let out a long, shaky breath. He had no words left. Finally, Mark stood, placing a firm hand on Andre's shoulder. I need you to trust me. Tomorrow, meet me outside this store. Not as Mark Edwards, not as Marcus Ellington, the CEO, but as two men who are about to change each other's lives. Andre looked up at him, searching his face for any hint of dishonesty, but all he saw was sincerity. All right, he whispered. I'll be there. Mark gave a small, reassuring smile. Good, because tomorrow, everything changes. That night, Andre lay awake in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling. His sister slept in the next room, his nephew's soft snores carrying through the thin walls. For the first time in years, Andre allowed himself a dangerous thought. What if things really could change? Meanwhile, in his penthouse office, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at the company logo on the wall. He had made countless deals, signed contracts worth billions, and steered his empire through storms. But nothing had ever felt as important as the decision he was about to make. Tomorrow, he would show Andre and the world that compassion was more powerful than profit. The next morning, Andre stood outside the grocery store, arms wrapped in their usual braces, his body aching from another sleepless night. He wasn't sure why he'd come. Maybe curiosity, maybe hope, maybe because something in Marcus's eyes yesterday had felt real. And for a man who had spent years carrying the weight of impossible burdens, even a spark of hope was worth chasing. Marcus arrived not in his disguise, but in a sleek black sedan, his driver waiting at the curb. He stepped out in a tailored suit, yet his expression wasn't the aloof face of a billionaire. It was the same sincerity Andre had seen in the break room. "Morning, Andre," Marcus said warmly. Andre shifted uneasily. "Still feels weird. Standing here with you, knowing who you really are," Marcus chuckled. "Trust me, I feel the same. But today isn't about me. It's about you." He gestured to the car. "Come with me. I want to show you something." The ride was silent at first. Andre kept glancing out the window, clutching his knees nervously. Marcus, sensing his discomfort, finally spoke. "You've spent so much of your life giving, Andre. To your sister, to your nephew, to this company, even when it didn't give back. Today I want to give something to you." Andre frowned. "Look, I appreciate it, but I don't want charity. I don't want handouts." Marcus shook his head. "This isn't charity. This is recognition. It's justice. It's the way the world should have treated you all along." They arrived at a large brick building with a sign above the doors. Freshway Foundation Center. Andre blinked in confusion. "What is this place?" he asked. Marcus smiled. "It's something I've been working on quietly. Programs to support employees in crisis. Healthcare, family assistance, scholarships. It's small now, but after meeting you, it's about to become a lot bigger." Andre's throat tightened. "And why are you showing me this?" "Because," Marcus said firmly, "you're the reason it exists." Inside, staff greeted them warmly. Marcus led Andre into a spacious office where a folder sat waiting on the desk. He handed it to Andre. "Go on. Open it." Andre hesitated, then slowly lifted the cover. His eyes scanned the documents, and his breath caught. Inside were approvals, full medical coverage for his sister's treatments, a scholarship program for his nephew, and a permanent full salary position for Andre that didn't require him to stand at a register with broken arms. His hands shook as he flipped through page after page. This can't be real." "It's real," Marcus said softly. "I told you yesterday, everything changes, and it starts with you." Tears spilled freely down Andre's face. He pressed a hand against his mouth, overwhelmed. "Marcus, you don't understand. I've been praying for something, anything that would take this weight off me. And now," his voice broke, "I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me," Marcus replied gently. "Just promise me one thing, that you'll take care of yourself now, that you'll let yourself breathe for once." Andre nodded, unable to speak, his chest heaving with sobs of relief. But just as hope lit the room, Marcus noticed something in Andre's expression shift. A shadow. A heaviness that no folder of papers could erase. "Andre," Marcus said carefully, "what is it?" "What aren't you telling me?" Andre swallowed hard, lowering the folder. His eyes glistened with fresh tears. Not of relief this time, but of sorrow. "There's something I haven't told you," he whispered. "Something I didn't want anyone to know." Marcus leaned forward, his stomach twisting. "Tell me." Andre took a long, shaky breath. "The reason my arms are like this, it's not just an accident. It's not just bad luck. A year ago, I was working 2 jobs, exhausted. Fell asleep at the wheel driving home, crashed, my sister was in the car." Marcus's heart sank. Andre's voice trembled. "She survived, but her illness got worse after the accident. And my arms. They've never healed right since. Every time I look at these braces, I see that night. I see her pain. And I can't forgive myself." The room fell silent. Marcus felt the weight of the truth like a blow to the chest. This wasn't just about poverty or broken systems. It was about guilt, an invisible chain Andre had been dragging behind him every single day. Andre's tears fell harder. "You can give me money. You can give me a new job. But you can't give me back the night I stole from her. You can't give me back the man I was before all this." Marcus's eyes stung. He reached across the desk, placing a firm hand over Andre's. "Listen to me. You've been punishing yourself long enough. Yes, mistakes were made. Yes, life hit harder than anyone deserves. But you've spent every single day since then paying the price, and not for yourself, but for her. That's not weakness, Andre. That's redemption. Andre shook his head, but Marcus continued, his voice breaking with emotion. You want to know the truth? You've already been forgiven. By your sister, by your nephew, by life itself. The only person who hasn't forgiven you is you. Andre broke down, sobbing openly, years of buried guilt pouring out at once. Marcus stood and pulled him into a firm embrace. You're not alone anymore, Marcus whispered. Not in this fight. Not in this life. For the first time in years, Andre allowed himself to believe it. To believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry everything on his own. In the weeks that followed, Andre's life began to change. His sister received proper care. His nephew enrolled in the scholarship program. And Andre himself, freed from the register, was offered a new role in the foundation, helping design programs for employees in need. When asked why, Marcus simply said, because no one understands the struggle better than Andre. Andre still wore his braces. He still carried his scars. But now, he also carried something else. Hope. And every time he walked into the foundation center, he remembered the day a stranger disguised as a trainee had stepped into his life and turned his heartbreak into a second chance. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't come from heaven. Sometimes they come from seeing someone's pain and choosing not to look away.